Sup freaks, it's your biological other Death by Proxy back and again with a podcast. What? This is crazy mode, guys. So yeah, I thought I would, I mean, I've been wanting to do something like this for a while, but I was never really quite sure what to do it on or how I would go about doing it, but I wanted to do something like this just so I feel like it's a good way to just sort of present things in like a very laid back kind of way, you know, and because animations take ages to like do obviously, and like gaming videos take ages to edit, and so that can leave my channel with like big gaps where nothing's come out. I thought this would be kind of just like a fun way, you know, for me to sort of explain, talk about whatever has been on my mind, I guess. But more specifically, I think it's gonna be mostly to do with sort of characters and world building. I think that's the route I'm gonna end up going down, but we'll see. This is very, very heavily inspired by CM Kozman's podcast, which is really good, by the way. Check it out. He comes up later in this video, so double shout out, I guess. But yeah, so I just thought, yeah, we'll see where this goes. I've also, a difference between that podcast, this podcast, is probably swag. I tried to film this one once before, but I couldn't really stay focused on anything. I kept sort of trailing off and just being like, and then I wouldn't talk for ages. I don't know. So I put on some music in the background. I hope it doesn't get copyright claimed, but I've played her stuff before and it didn't. So hopefully, you know, hopefully it should be fine. But listen to Lauren Boosfeld right now, also known as Nero's Day at Disneyland. But this was one she just released under a normal name, I guess. So, what is this image that is on the screen? What do all these little fellas mean? Well, I had sort of been thinking about, I guess, what different sort of like creature shapes, body shapes are there on Earth, or at least of like terrestrial ones I was thinking about, because in the sea pretty much anything goes. You know, I was thinking what are there that we know of, and what is possible, if that makes sense. I feel like we need to sort of have this in mind for the, let's face it, the inevitability eventually one day humans are gonna meet like another intelligent species from another planet. We're gonna meet aliens one day, and we have to sort of think about what could they look like. Yeah, and even like non-intelligent, what possible sort of shapes are there? Is it just, have we sort of seen everything, or could there be something else? I feel like this is a good sort of thing to think about with like not just, you know, that, but also with like character design. What different shapes could you have for like character designs? And also something I noticed when I was doing this is not everything is mutually exclusive. Like some things can be like one and the other, if that makes sense. So I have this little folder of goodies right here, of different photos for me to put up. I guess I could also just sort of like flick through, I suppose. But there'll be spoilers, I guess. So yeah. So this was what I was sort of inspired by. In the Pokemon games, they have, like, Pokemon are classed as being in different shapes. So, you know, you got a guy that's a ball, a guy that's a ball with 2 legs, a guy that's a fish, a guy that's a bug, a guy that's a dog, or just a 4-legged creature, guy with wings. And I sort of thought that's quite interesting. You know, out of all the Pokemon that there are, these are the shapes that they take, and even more sort of simplified back in here. I think I prefer these. I'm not sure why these two would be split like that. I guess one's got bug wings, one's got like angel sort of wings. One's more like a dragon, one's more like a bug, I guess. But in my mind, I don't really split that. If you know, if it's got legs and wings, then it's got legs and wings. You know, you know. So I sort of prefer these more abstract sort of looking shapes. But I guess because it's a kids game as well, you know, things have to be clear. So then, where's my one? Hi there. Awesome podcast, going up to a great start. Awesome podcast. So, at first, my first sort of thought when I was doing this was just for me to sketch. While I was thinking, can I zoom in further? I don't really use the... there we go. I don't really use the Photos app on here much. So the first 2 things that I immediately thought of was like an animal with all its legs on the ground, and then I guess sort of like a humanoid where the spine's upright and it's got 2 feet on the floor, and then the other limbs would be here. And while I sort of drew this as sort of like quadrupedal and like a human, that's not always the case. Because in my mind, like bugs and stuff, like insects and arthropods, most of them I think would also fit under this. And even like you have like a lizard where its legs are splayed outwards, I would still class that as being like this. It's got like a head on one end, tail on the other end, and then it's got the legs in the middle. You know, however many legs that might be, you know, it's got all the legs on the floor. And then this would be 2 legs on the floor, and then the spine or whatever would be upright, and then the other appendages would be like arms there. And I didn't give him little graspy hands. You'll see later on, whenever I needed to indicate that something was like a hand and off the floor, I would draw it as a little grasper, but I didn't in this case. And then I was like, oh, of course, we've got I like to call this the sort of the saurian body type, where it's like a theropod dinosaur. And I also drew this to indicate that a bird would also be that. I don't know if I consider them to be entirely different body types, but the presence of like a wing, as in like a flying implement, does come up later. So I guess they would be, again, there a lot of things are like very they can fall under 2 categories, if that makes sense. And I was sort of kind of stuck for a while after that, because again, remember, this was my like, why is it frozen? Come on, there we go. I was very much sort of like, this was my, you know, I hadn't really thought of other things. This was top of my head, what can I think of? And so I was sort of stuck for a little while afterwards, thinking, well, at the moment I can only really think of like all legs on the ground, only 2 legs on the ground and the 2 hands up, or legs on the ground. So that will be like 2 legs on the ground, rest of the limbs off the ground, or 2 limbs off the ground, the rest of the limbs on the ground. That was sort of my thinking there. And I was like, what sort of else kind of is there? And then I sort of thought about praying mantis. I kind of didn't really draw it properly to what I was thinking. But I was sort of thinking about how their kind of body is sort of like a diagonal slope, rather than it being like either straight out, like horizontally like a dinosaur, or vertically like a human. Their spine is sort of, well, they don't have a spine per se, but I guess they're like, the way their body is structured is more like it's like a 45-degree sort of angle there. So I sort of drew a little praying mantis type thing where it has its front legs off the ground and then it's got some of the legs on the ground there. But yeah, interesting, you know, that is sort of the only animal that's like that. But then again, so's humans. Humans are the only animal that is still around. Well, even then, only Homo sapiens are still around. There was other species of humans, and even other like apes that used to stand like this, like Australopithecus and that. But they're all extinct now. So now we're the only ones, you know, that are like that. And then of course I was like, wait, obviously, I don't know why it took me so long to think about like snakes and worms and slugs and snails where they don't have legs. That's pretty obvious. And then I thought of pterosaurs, where again, you could class it as being the 4-legged thing, but I think the fact that it's a wing and it's walking on the wings makes it slightly different, so that's why I added the pterosaur. And then after I added the pterosaur, I was like, well, what if we're saying, you know, a wing is a different type of limb to a leg or an arm, then I guess a bird would be a different version of the saurian sort of morph, I guess. But yeah, but as well, saying that, I feel like, you know, where you get like a chimpanzee or a gorilla where they walk on the knuckles, that is, in a way, I guess, a sort of like between sort of both of the morphs of like, because when they sit down they sort of, and they can, like a chimp especially, can like, you know, get up, angry chimp. You see an angry chimp? That's terrifying. You don't want an angry chimp. But yeah, I guess saying that with the wings, you'd have something like this with wings on the back for like a beetle, or if we're thinking like mythical animals, you know, like a dragon would have wings sort of there. But I didn't think of that at the time when drawing this. But yeah, if we're classing wings as like a different thing, then I suppose another morph would be like that. And that would sort of go into the next category, I think, because I was thinking of things that do exist on Earth. I mean, yeah, like a beetle that does. So, yeah, I guess that would be like a beetle would have a wing on its back. Yeah, that would go in the does exist on Earth category. Guys, beetle truther. Beetles aren't real. Guys, beetles are flat. They were faked by NASA. So after that little exercise, I group all these into the real world category, real life, planet Earth category. Then I sort of started thinking, just off the top of my head again, what other morphs could exist that I can just sort of think of right now. And obviously the obvious one that comes to mind for me is like a centaur type creature. So it's got like the half upright, half, I guess, like 4-legged in this case, but again, any number of limbs could be there, any number of limbs could be here. I have quite a few like species and characters that I feel fall into this, and even if the spine isn't like completely upright and it's just sort of, sort of like a mantis, I suppose, but I drew it very poorly there. I was trying to indicate that this was like, the body was like at an angle, but I suppose the body wouldn't be at an angle here, but then it would be an angle here, and then there'll be like arms, and then like a head. I guess that kind of shape. And I also thought of a creature that I drew a while ago, where it had a head and then legs, and then it had like a tentacle sort of limb that came out of the neck or chest sort of area. And then I was like, oh yeah, we're trying to draw this as simply as possible, so it could also work with 2 legs. But I kept that still, because again, with these I'm trying to think of what's the simplest sort of shape, the simplest shape possible. And I guess you could even have a creature that's just 2 legs, nothing else. But yeah, that creature was the, hey, go away. Where is it? There. I call this thing, sometimes I call it the desert beast, mostly I call it the intelligent designer. Wow. As you can see, he's got like a tentacle and like a claw, so you can grasp things with that. And that is a limb in a way, so that's why I included that. Yeah, and then I couldn't really think of anything else off the top of my head, so I thought now I'll look at a couple of existing properties that I know have got some different body shapes, some really interesting things. And of course, the first thing that came to mind is All Tomorrows. Yay! And if you haven't seen that, it would be, you know what? It's gonna be easier if I just open things like this, right? There we go. I couldn't find a good high quality image of the cover in English. I could only find it in this language. I think it might be Polish, but I'm not sure. But so this is a book by C.M. Kozman, who I mentioned earlier, does an awesome podcast. But it's about in the future, humans get experimented on by aliens and turned into different creatures. It's quite dark, but if you don't mind body horror, I would really recommend it. Yeah, so if you can hear me like sort of snuffling or sneezing or whatever, my hay fever's been really, really bad lately. It's the summer, what can I say? But yeah, and I did have to make this YouTube friendly, guys. But yeah, so this, I know I can translate this for you guys. That says All Tomorrows. I'm a genius. Oops. Sorry, I've got like a call center microphone. That's my setup. Is I got a call center headset, and a laptop, and a external hard drive, and glass of Pepsi, and a conservatory with foxes and dogs outside making a noise. Hopefully you can't hear that. But yeah, there are quite a few like interesting ideas in this book. One of which being the sort of main interesting strange thing that I can think about with these, which are called sail people. And now there's sort of 2 really interesting things about these. The first one is the way they use their limbs here, their sort of their front limbs, which for us that would be the arm. Is that they are like a living boat, I suppose, and you can see there a flying creature that is related to them. So So like these wings, they actually evolved from like wings, like from a flying wing. But they are now like the sails of a boat, and they like catch the wind on the sails, and that's how they move around, which is really, really quite strange and interesting, I feel. Because I can't really think of anything that currently exists. I guess maybe like on a man of war they got like a little ridge on the back that kind of acts like a sail, drifts along. But yeah, this is really quite interesting, I feel. And they've also got this interesting thing with their tongues, where their tongues almost become sort of like tentacles. They're sort of split and then they're split again, like sort of like that. But they don't even need to be like split like that. It could just be like a tongue, like a prehensile sort of tongue, I guess. And that whole like they can move the tongue thing was actually an inspiration behind one of my species, that the anstoners, which are like, they've got like 2 legs, and then they use their tongue as like a hand, I guess, like a, you know, like a tentacle to grasp through the drywall. See, it was a great idea to have music on this so that you can you can hear me sing. So I ended up with my little diagram. I ended up splitting them into 2 things, that being like using limbs as sails, and using, it started off as a tongue, but then I sort of thought it could be any facial protrusion, anything to do with the mouth, the front of the face, as like a tongue. So that is more like an anstoner, an anstonus. I can't remember what the plural or the singular was of them, actually. I am a terrible writer, I'm sorry guys. I think it is anstonus with an S as a singular and the plural. Like how Leopter is a singular and a plural. That's my tip-top ultimate species. I feel like all the development has gone into the Devotite specifically, and then the Leopter, and then everything else is just like, yeah, they also exist. I seriously do need to like develop more. Jeez. Anyway, that will be a whole different episode, I reckon. And then this next thing, this isn't something that was in All Tomorrows, but it was something else that CM Coastman came up with. You know, this is sort of what I say, you know, oh, this came up with that, this came up with that, but it could be a case more likely of like, you know, because they say that there's no such thing as an original idea, I guess. So could have been done before, but this is where I saw it first as these things called clobberers, where they have the front limbs, the front most part of the limbs, are just like balls. They're just like clubs, and they just like hit things with them, you know. And again, there isn't anything that's like this on Earth, so there isn't really anything that I can like compare it to, you know. Like with the sail people and the centaurs, there isn't anything that's like that. And then so the next thing, and again, this was something that I was later like, actually this kind of does exist on Earth, and I'll explain that later. But an asymmetrical body plan with a grasping limb, with a grasping limb. So it would have like most of the feet on the ground, but then one of them, and not like in the middle, it would be like off to the side here, as like a grasping organ. And you see that with the asymmetric people, which as you can see here, they've got like a hand there that they can use to grasp with, and then just they're kind of vestigial, I guess. Fingers, I'm not really sure what they could do with those other than maybe give another one a hug. Aww, everybody say aww, isn't that sweet? And then they move on these are actually like their fingers, but I guess we would class that as like a limb. So they've got the little spidery legs. And then, you know, and they've only got one really. So maybe this doesn't necessarily. Again, it could be two categories. It's sort of like a centaur, but then at the same time, only one of it's got that asymmetrical element to it. But I think it mostly shows with the lopsided. Again, I had to censor her, but these are the lopsiders, which is actually the ancestors of the asymmetricals. But yeah, they have like these limbs for moving, and then that limb for manipulating. As you can see here, I think she was like, yeah, like feeding. Got some food there, flicking and feeding these little guys. And I never noticed before until I like zoomed in on this. They have hair, like sort of very sparsely. They've got some hair, and I always thought they were bald. Yeah, so hairy representation. I don't know. But then as I was drawing like the, I guess, simplified version of this sort of like body plan idea, I was like, hang on a minute, they're kind of already existent like this on Earth. You know those crabs where they've got one really big claw? And that's what they use for grabbing, and then they've got like another little claw. That's sort of like this. Again, it's a bit more like the asymmetricals than the lopsiders, because they do have that other limb that's raised off the ground, but the other limb being raised off the ground in question is like different from. They've got a grasper, and then they've just got a little weak thing. And I actually had to come back and add these next two ones later, because I was like, oh yeah, there was this as well. This, the snake people have, I think, my favourite of the new, other than, I mean, I do love like a saurian body type, but I think this was my favourite like idea that I saw in All Tomorrows that was like really stood out to me, so much that I basically copied it for a different species. And that is again sort of like a snake or like a worm, but then at the end is like a grasper. Like, and we see this with, where are they? Here we go. The snake people. So as you can see, they are sort of like whoop, like a snake, and then they've got like a grasping organ at the end here, which is actually like the feet. That's sort of like the, I guess that would be the bottom of the torso, and then they've got like a really elongated torso. And maybe, I mean, this guy's fully clothed so he can't see, but maybe they have some like vestigial hands? Or maybe they're just like enclosed under the skin, like the back legs of a whale, where it's just like two little bones now. But yeah, they have like a hand at the end. I say a hand, I guess a foot technically, but it is a hand, you know. I feel like we need to come up with like some proper terms of what I'm really trying to think of here. But I guess we'll just call it a grasping organ for now. But yeah, and I did sort of end up copying this idea for this body plan with with one of the characters in my comic. She's sort of like not really like a snake. Her species are descended from like aquatic worm creatures, and so sort of like how, you know, if you compare like a human to a monkey, that's kind of, you know, that's offensive. If you would compare like one of these creatures to a worm, they'd be like, hey, that's mean, that's offensive, don't call me a worm. But yeah, I do like coming up with sort of little sort of cultural things like that, and an explanation as to why it would be that. That's, you know, it's world building, it's swag, it's cool, it's fun to do. And then I sort of thought about the modular people, they call them. And now this is an interesting case because on Earth, the sort of the colonial organisms, sort of like a siphonophore or like a pyrosome, they all live in the water. So they were ruled out of my discussion of like terrestrial body plans. But they, yeah, I guess I took a look at the modular people again. I was like, yeah, sure, I guess that could exist, but that's really hard to pin down. Because, as you can see here, oh, that's a really bad. Where did I get this picture from? This is the shittest quality in the world. But yeah, each one of these individual things is an individual organism. And if you've seen how like crazy a siphonophore can get, they can really just look like anything. So I feel like the same sort of thing would happen with like a colonial organism on the land as well. So if I get distracted, there's like I've been watching this huge spider, and it disappeared for a while, and it's just come back, and it's really fascinating. Massive spider. Wish you guys could see it. Wish you were here to look at this massive, big ass spider that's in my conservatory. But sorry guys, I gotta talk to you about made up aliens some more. But yeah, so that, I feel like I've not got the brain power to comprehend all the different forms you could get of a siphonophore type organism. So that could be anything, you know. And would you class each individual one as its own body shape, or is the whole thing as a whole body shape? You know what I mean? I feel like they could probably mix and match as well. So I left it out. Then the next thing that came to mind for like interesting body shapes is one of my, whoops, that's the music. One of my favorite video games ever, the Eternal Cylinder. Wow. And if you've not played this yet, I would very much. No way, guys. There's actually, I think there's 2 massive spiders in here. I'm so lucky. Unless it's really, really quickly crawled to a different wall. Maybe that's maybe this is, maybe it's like a super spider. I'm gonna be Spider-Man, 'cause it's gonna bite me. I don't know. Anything can happen. Anyways, enough about this stupid spider on my. It's on the door now. Mind you, it's pretty fast. Maybe it is the same spider. I guess that's a mystery, because we're talking about the Eternal Cylinder right now, guys. But yeah, basically this game is you have these are like the player creatures. They're called trebums. And personally, this was where I was like, I changed my definition of something with a tongue to something with a facial protrusion, because that could also include like a trunk or like lips. Basically anything on the, you know, the mouth and nose sort of area, I guess. And that would include these guys. That's what these guys' body shapes are. But yeah, they can, like, the main game mechanic is after you eat something, you can like mutate in order to like survive like different environments in the game, and you got there's this massive eternal cylinder that's like rolling behind you, and yeah, it's a lovely game, beautiful story. I won't spoil it if you're not played it, but yeah, I'd highly recommend it. This comes highly recommended. This gets the Proxy seal of approval. But what makes this different from where before when I was talking about All Tomorrows is that the Eternal Cylinder is actually based on a book, my favourite book of all time, in fact, which I have a picture somewhere, Codex Seraphinianus. Which, as you see here, these things, I think these were probably the inspiration behind the Trebum, where they got like the two sort of human feet, and then they can change whatever is on the top. That seems very much like what the Trebum were based on. And now this book is it's supposed to be like it's an encyclopedia from a whole different dimension. So it's written in a language that doesn't make sense to us. Because I mean, it's literally just like nonsense. The guy who made the book was just, people have tried to like decipher it, but the guy who made it, I think his name's Luigi. He, and not Luigi like Mario. Luigi like he's from Italy, so his name's Luigi. But yeah, he's said that it doesn't mean anything. It's part of the art piece that it doesn't mean anything. And you kind of get a feel for it here. There aren't really, I mean, there are like different creatures, but they're very much so based on like creatures from Earth, but like with an extra something. Like there's like a dog where its feet have melted to the ground. There's like a deer that's cut in half, and then there's like something in the inside. One of them is literally just a mongoose wearing an earring. And then, you know, your page is all about the culture of this world and stuff, and it's like, it is really cool. It is, if you can afford a copy of this book, I'd recommend it, because it is quite expensive. I do have a physical copy. There are like scans online. I mean, obviously, otherwise how would I get this picture if nobody scanned it? But it is like a lot better to have as a physical thing to like look through. But yeah, so that's why this can't really be analyzed in the same way as, because I was thinking of this thought experiment was more of like a things that could exist in the physical world. I'm not really too sure that any of this could exist in the physical world. And with the Eternal Cylinder, it is a little bit more I guess realistic-ish, I suppose. There are still like the hybrid creatures, but they are explained in the game. Again, I'm not spoiling it or anything. I'm truly not going to spoil it. But if you have both played the game and read the book, it is, well, I say read the book. You can't really read something that's not in any language, but you get what I mean, all right? If you've experienced both forms of media, you'll know what I'm talking about when I say there's like the hybrid creatures in this game. But yeah, there are some interesting ideas that I suppose could be able to be IRL, I suppose. And so I sketched out some of the things. And the most iconic creature, I think, whoopsie, not you, who are you, go away! I think the most iconic creature, other than the Trebum themselves, is this thing called the Omnigrom. As you can see here, it doesn't, at first looking at this, it's like, this doesn't really look you know, this is sort of one of the more surrealist creatures in the game. It doesn't really look like something that could naturally evolve. I mean, it's like got like human teeth. It's like a mouth with feet. And for some of them, I got the compendium enemies as well. So if you want to pause and read this, you can. But I thought that might give a little bit more sort of an explanation for people who haven't played the game as to sort of what this thing is, how it sort of functions. But yeah, it sort of walks along like that, and then it crunches. And it's, yeah, very aggressive, like omnivore creature. Now I reckon a way that this could possibly evolve and make sense is like sort of like a clam. If like a clam sort of creature was to evolve into a terrestrial form, I suppose it might work something in this sort of a similar way. So yeah, I included the omnigron because it's cool. Let's face it, it is kind of cool. Even if in the world of the Eternal Cylinder nothing really fits together, everything is just mashed together because it's based on a surrealist book, you know. And another creature that's in this game, this kind of falls under the category of the first one, actually, looking at it. But I did include them as two separate things. I'm not entirely sure why. I guess because it's just so strange. But they have this thing, I think it's called like a grass tub or a grass tube. But it's, yeah, it's like a tube, basically. And it just somehow feeds on carrion by just hoovering up stuff in here, and it's like a big rotating thing of teeth all the way through. See, again, I'm not really sure how that would work. Here it is. I'm not really sure how this would work in real life. But again, quite interesting because there's no real front end or back end to this thing, is it? It just sort of goes, any food goes in there. And it's just like completely, there's, again, slight spoiler warning, I guess, but there is a mission where you have to go inside one of these. You have to go through one and get something out of the middle of it. So, yeah. I did put that on there because it's just so strange and weird. And then looking at the creatures in the game, I was like, hang on a minute, there's something I haven't included on my other things, and that is like a tripod creature where the back leg is, you know, you've got the back leg and then the two front legs. And I did actually draw something like years ago that was like a creature from, it was supposed to be like my interpretation of what a Martian would look like if something evolved on Mars, but I don't have that picture on me right now. But this was what was in the game, made me think that. And that is actually the head, by the way. This is the Great Gar, and that is the head. And they actually sort of filter. You think that's the head, you think it's like a giraffe, but nuh-uh. And they got like a gas sack. This is what I'm talking about. These creatures in this game are meant to be like truly bizarre and weird, and they don't really seem like they're related to each other. But that is kind of the vibe. So this is less spec, more just surrealist creature design, which is okay. I feel like, you know, not everything has to be like, oh, it's got to be like scientifically like possible. The spider is eyeing me up now, guys. This is it. I'm gonna be the next Spider-Man, I reckon. Oh, he's walking away. Oh, goodbye. Or she, actually. It's probably a girl, because, you know, the girl spiders are bigger. Anyway, so as you can see here, the back leg is like one back leg, and then the front legs, two front legs. And I think a way that, obviously it's not how it worked in here, but I think a way that something like this could evolve is if, like a tail on a fish, if, you know how tetrapods evolved where, because we had 4 fins that then became 4 legs, what if something only had 2 front fins but a tail, and then that tail sort of became a leg? That was how I imagined it with the Martian creature. The spider's just staring at me and she hasn't moved. This is crazy, guys. Crazy spider moments. But yeah, I actually really hate these great gars. Grr. I'm the #1 great gar hater. And here you go. It talks more about here. You can pause and read if you like. But yeah, it's got like a big ball of gas on its back. It's crazy, crazy weird, and I hate it. It's my least favorite creature. And I think that might be all of the music. Oh no, we got one more song. We got one more song. And then I'll have to put something else on. But yeah, there's also, this is a very abstract sort of drawing of what I'm have in my mind for this. But this was based on, there's a creature called a schlock. And, sorry, the spider is skittering. I should have recorded in a different room that didn't have a cool spider in it, because I'm getting so distracted. But yeah, here it is, the schlock. And this, again, this is one of the more unbelievable creatures, I think, but I guess it could work in a way, because what this is supposed to be is it's like a big round ball with loads of eyes, and then in order to like move, it will like, these are like sacs with like a tongue inside. These are all little mouths. So in order to move itself, it rolls across. It will stick a tongue out and roll along. And there is something else that is very vaguely similar to this in a way, I guess. If you've watched the documentary Alien Worlds, I think, and it's on Netflix, in the very first episode, I believe, there's like these sort of generalist omnivore things, and because the gravity on this planet is really high, they just sort of roll along and crush things with their body, and then they can eat it that way. But they sort of more look like a conglomerate sort of ball with like spiky mace things on them, but a little bit like this because it's got spikes on it. So when I drew the and again I've got the compendium entry of this if you if you was wanted to pause and read that. But yeah, so when I included that on my little diagram, I did it very vaguely so it could sort of both be like a spherical ball that propels itself, or like a clump with loads of limbs that propels itself. And then the last thing here is the onkfur, or onkifer. I didn't have the compendium entry for this one. You can see here it's got like an inflatable sack on its back, and it inflates and it floats on the sack. And yeah, there's not really anything like that on Earth, but I think again this could work in I guess both like a low gravity world and a high gravity world. I know, crazy. How could that work? Well, you see, on the high gravity world, the atmosphere is going to be denser, so it'll be easier for things to float. And then obviously on the low gravity world, come on guys, it's low gravity. Okay, let's get some more tunes on. Let's just go back from the start, actually. And yeah, and as I was like doing this, looking this up, I realized actually there's something there's another example of this sort of body plan. That's in the Alien Worlds, but again, I can't remember what this creature is called. I just found a screenshot with one of them in it. But yeah, they've got like a floaty, and they float up, and then they've got their little grabby limbs. But again, they don't even have to have the little grabby limbs. I guess they could just sort of do that. So that was it in terms of the two specific. Why are you so small and tiny? Yeah, in terms of there being like two specific properties that I was looking at, with that being All Tomorrows and then the Eternal Cylinder. And then I sort of started to look at just sort of general things that I could see in like other sort of sci-fi properties, and they're at the bottom here. Some are more generic than others. That is really specific to something I was thinking of, because a lot of these I was like, I thought of them and then I went to look up pictures of them, and you know, and that's how I discovered that, oh, actually there was something like that in what's it called as well. So, oh come on guys, I'm just trying to scroll, guys, just let me scroll. There we go, I'm just trying to zoom, guys. So this is like the two front limbs being on the ground, but then the two back limbs as graspers. So sort of different to what we see in most Earth species. And there's a couple of examples I can think of. The main example, and the one that I have the pictures of, is this thing, the Night Stalker, which is by Dougal Dixxon, from Afterman. And I actually found two pictures of this. This one I got off of his website, and at better quality. He must have done this one later. But yeah, these evolved from bats, and so the front legs, which used to be wings, are now like things for walking on, and then the back legs sort of come over the top there, and they're like the hands. And there was a couple other examples I thought of while I was doing this. That being there's a species in Star Wars, I can't remember what it's called, but there is a species in Star Wars that's like that. And there's also there was a spec project, I can't remember what it's called or who it's by, but it was a world where everything was amphibians, and one of them was a species that lived in the trees, and they had a body sort of like this, where the two front legs were on the floor, and then the two back legs came up or came over. I can't remember if it was coming up the back or over the front, but either way, you know, the back legs were the graspers. And then in a similar vein to that, there is something else that I remembered, which is using the tail as a grasper, and that is a little bit similar to the snake people idea, but I feel like it differs in the fact that with the snake people, they don't have limbs, whereas with this body shape, they do have limbs. And that is based off of this creature called a Zoopafink, which is by a young artist whose name is something like something red whales. I think it's like the red whale art and then some numbers after it. But yeah, they have like a wonderful DeviantArt gallery where they've got this spec project of all these like two-limbed creatures with mouths that open sideways. and the intelligent ones ended up, the tail came round, and they would use that to pick things up with. And I thought that is a really good idea. They've got a YouTube channel as well, I think, where they did like little animations showing how the different creatures move and stuff. But yeah, I hadn't actually seen that in a while, so I had to like look out because I couldn't remember what they were called. But yeah, they're called Zuperfinks, and yeah, they're a very interesting mechanic with the tail being a hand. And now this is where I made a boo-boo. I messed up big time, and I messed up royally, because I thought, oh yeah, remember the Birins? They're quite interesting because they have like 4 legs and then the middle legs are the hands. That's really interesting, right? So I drew that, and then I got on with the rest of the creatures. But when I went to get my reference pictures to show, you know, because I got all reference pictures of the different things to show you what I was talking about. Turns out I was misremembering, and the Birins have a more sort of like mantis-ish or centaur-ish, or even like saurian-ish, I guess, type body. It is actually the front legs that are off the ground, and the back legs are the 4 back legs are the. Because I thought it was the front legs on the ground, middle legs off the ground, back legs on the ground. But no, I was wrong. No, put those on the ground and pick your other legs up. But yeah, those are the Birins. They are by I can't remember his real name, but his online name is abiogenesis. And he's got, you know, just like this really, really detailed and thought out like world and the whole history of this society. Of these alien creatures called the Birins. So yeah, even though that's not what the Birins actually look like, and I misremembered what a Birin looked like, this is still a body plan that could. So I guess this really should be moved up to just random things I thought of category. 'Cause, you know, that sure is the random thing that I thought of, 'cause it's not a Birin. But again, maybe not, because I just realised something. With our next entry, I was going to talk about something from Spore Creatures on the DS. But actually, there are creatures that are a bit like this in Spore Creatures, where the middle limbs are the hands. Like there was something. It was like a whip something. Yeah. Anyway. So this was, I started thinking about a particular species from Spore Creatures, which was always my favourite ones as a kid. They're called tactos, and as you can see, they've got the front and back limbs on the ground, and then the middle limbs are sort of on the back, and they are like arms. They do pick things up with these. I'm not quite sure how that actually works, because they've just got like a sort of like a spear. But I guess in the logic of the Spore universe, they can pick things up, and these are their hands, and they're actually intelligent, and they also breathe fire. These things are just so darn cool, but they will kick your ass because they are very territorial and aggressive. And the only way I could get them to be my friends was I stole one of the babies and I raised the baby. And I know that's messed up. But this is nature. This is nature. This is how it works. Okay? Committing war crimes on Spore Creatures for the DS. And yeah, and so then I remembered another creature. This is from something called the Epic of Serena. I'm not sure who it's by, but it's another speculative evolution thing. Oh, here we go. It's by Bajda. I think that's how you pronounce that. But yeah, so these, again, these are all creatures that are descended from earth animals. I think these were birds and these were fish. But yeah, it's been a while since I've had a look at this. But yeah, their ears, or horns, I suppose, but they're sort of more like ears, are like the hands. The ears are the hands. Crazy! And again, they sort of have the... Well, I mean, sort of have... They literally do have the tripod thing going on. So, like I said, could be more than one... you know, creatures can fall under more than one of these categories. These arbitrary categories that I'm trying to lump everything in. So I only gave it 2 legs here just to accentuate that what I'm talking about is it's the ears. It's the ears that are the hands. Again, I guess not too dissimilar to having it be like a tongue or a trunk, but I feel like this is different because it's on the top of the head rather than on the front of the face. But again, I guess argue in the comments with what you think this is. And now this is really specific because I remembered an episode of Alien Planet where they had these things. I had to look it up. They're called pentapods. And I was like, wow, that's a pretty shit picture of it. But then I ended up finding a sort of a better one. So yeah, they're pentapods. And rather than being most, well, I kind of think that all like animals that you have, even like arthropods, tetrapods, all sort of like terrestrial animals that I can think of, are bilaterally symmetrical. But with these guys, they were radially symmetrical, and they had like they could just scuttle one way. And then they see something over there. They don't even have to turn around. They just... So they don't really have like a front side. And I thought they were really quite interesting because there isn't really anything like that on Earth. So I just drew one from memory, actually. I think I gave it too many legs. But yeah, and they have like these grasping organs. I tried to make it as simple as possible, but again, yeah, it is just a pentapod, I suppose. And then thinking about the these tripod creatures, I remembered this is from normal Spore, I guess. This is like the mascot of Spore, called the Willosaur. And again, they fall under the tail as a hand thing that the Zooperfinks had. But they have, you know, like 2 back legs, 1 front leg. You know what? I'm just now thinking of another one where it's 4 legs, but like 1, 2, 3, 4. I need to update my diagram. Jeez! I'm on a roll! I'm just coming up with body plans left and right, and center, and wherever. This is crazy. But yeah, so... And they sort of move by, like, the front leg and then... Shoop, shoop. So yeah, I had to include that. It's sort of like a reverse of what the Great Gar has, where the back leg is the thing. And then, the last one that I have for you guys today is they've got 2 legs, but not like how a human or a bird has got 2 legs. We are losers with our 2 legs side by side. They've got 2 legs, one in front of the other, these bad boys. And what made me think of this was these things from Expedition. Or I think they made a documentary of it, but I can't remember what the documentary is called. But yeah, so they have like 2 legs, and this is very hard to see here. this might be a little bit easier to see, but they're called a gyro sprinter. So as you can see here, they got like, yeah, 2 legs like that. Kind of hard to visualize, I suppose. I sort of need to find a picture, because these are the only pictures I could find, I think. I've not actually got the book, but I'm guessing these are the only 2 pictures of them in the book. But yeah, they've got legs like that, and then there's the head, the little tongue. I think these are eyes? I'm not sure though. It has been ages since I've like I don't own this book. But obviously I've like looked up like pictures online and stuff, so it's been ages since I've had a look at this. But yeah, I sort of remembered them last minute, and I thought, actually, that is true. And now I'm thinking, something that I could include is with, you know, sort of like this, but then with 2 extra limbs there, so it would have 4 legs. So, what is the point of this all? There isn't one really. I just thought this would be I just thought this was fun. A fun thing to think about. And get your brain juices flowing. Because I feel like I do often fall under the category of just having them be like, think these three shapes, and sometimes centaurs. So I felt like I needed to expand my thoughts to different body shapes when I'm coming up with like alien creatures, because I would like to develop the different worlds more. I feel like the world of Helio, which is the world where the Devatites and the Sapsies live, I feel like I have really developed that, and I would like to further develop that. I do want one day to have that be like a fully fleshed out world, all the ecosystems explored, like Expedition. But have the creature, because that was my one gripe with Expedition, which it feels like I'm not allowed to say anything bad, because like, it is awesome, it is incredible, the artwork is fantastic, the designs are amazing, but they often don't feel like they fit together. You can't really see how one creature is related to another creature, which is fine with something like the Eternal Cylinder, because it's not trying to be scientifically realistic. It is based on a book that is like a work of surrealist art, and it never tried, I guess, other than the creatures having like binomial scientific names, it never tries to explain itself. Like, is this planet flat? It just, because there's a big cylinder rolling across it? There's like, the planet's moon has rings? You know, it's not supposed to be taken seriously. Whereas with Expedition, that is written like very seriously and very scientifically, and it is fantastic. But the creature, I just can't feel like it's a world where the creatures feel related, if that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but if you've like read the book, or I guess seen the documentary, then you sort of know what I mean. But yes, and hopefully this inspired you guys as well as it has inspired me, clearly, by the fact that I was like, hang on a minute, what about if it had other legs there? And if you can think of any other sort of terrestrial body shapes, smash that down in the comments below. And don't tell me you didn't like this video, because I will definitely be making more like this, because this was fun, and it was easy to do, and this way you get to see a little bit more of me while I'm busy working on other stuff. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching, listening, however you enjoyed this. I have another gaming video coming out soon, playing Slayers X. Again, there's multiple levels in this game, guys. Of course, I'm gonna, of course, I'm gonna play the other levels. I've also got an animation coming out, based on the if you guys have seen the "I am a surgeon" meme. I did my own epic twist on it. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys later because a lovely lady is just crawling towards me. And by that I mean the spider. So I'm gonna go look at this spider for ages probably and then realize it's like 3 in the morning and I have to go to bed. So yeah, adios guys.